Hello and welcome everyone to this very important video where we will discuss how we can reverse engineer utopia and control artificial superintelligence. In the last video, we saw how important that is because by 2029 latest, we will hit this ASI threshold. I think in 2027 more likely, but somewhere in that range. And the achievement of artificial superintelligence, of an artificial intelligence that's vastly smarter than an average human or even very smart humans, will be a decisive incision point in the history of humans, because at that point we are running into the problem that we open the gates for a scenario where this ASI has a runaway cognitive ability. And what that means is, if that ASI has infinite space cognitively to evolve rapidly and goes into recursive self-improvement, I proved in the last video that the probability of doom is 100%. There is no way of aligning this thing. It's logically impossible to align an AI like this. I proved this in the last video. And that means we are doomed. There is no way out and we will all die, to be very blunt and frank about it. That means the only solution is that by that time, we need to figure out how to put constraints on the ASI. That is a human and civilizational challenge. We can just make this decision in theory, but in practice, right now, humanity is not able to make that decision because we have conflicting interests. We have a race condition. There are too many people interested in other things, and we don't have enough alignment of the humans themselves. So ASI alignment means ASI constraint, and ASI constraint requires human alignment. That is a summary of what happened. I also put together a quick chart to outline a little more clearly, quantitatively, what the problem is and what the opportunity is. Why I'm starting to talk about utopia, not just doom. And why these two things, utopia and doom, are tightly interrelated. It's very dramatic. It's poetic. It doesn't matter. It's reality. So we have to face it. So what does this chart show us? I will tell you what it shows us. We have a red line and we have a blue line. The blue line is the doom trajectory. If that blue line happens, we are toast. Say goodbye to humanity in very short order, within 10 years. If we hit the red line, or we make the red line happen, then we survive and live in utopia. I will get to the little problem with that, but for now we live in utopia, which is very nice. Now, what are these lines and what are the scales here? On the left side, the 0 to 125, you see the multiples over human intelligence. So 25 means 25 times smarter than a 100 IQ human. In other words, we could describe that as IQ points. 25 means 2,500 IQ points. Who has these IQ points? The ASI. So an ASI agent would operate at 2,500 IQ, which is pretty good, right? It would basically vastly outperform the smartest human that ever lived in every field of science, business, politics, and everything. So I put there a threshold in here, and this is a very conservative threshold, meaning the line could be much lower too. I think it's maybe at 10, you're already talking about this. And it's the utopia threshold. What does it mean? It means once you are at that threshold, you can very easily build any utopia you want. Okay, because you can remove all the diseases, you can achieve immortality, you can make these AIs do a lot of things. You have to consider it's not just one ASI with a 2,500 IQ, it would be billions or millions, whatever you want to create. You can copy these things and let them work in teams, and you can imagine what that does. What is important to see, and I don't know if that threshold here is accurate. If it's 25, it could be 10, it could be 5, it could be 15. But what I'm saying is 25 is the upper limit of what's possibly needed. I can guarantee you that. You do not need a 5,000 IQ ASI to solve all problems. Latest here, you have the utopia threshold. I believe it's actually much lower. It's around, maybe 500, so 5, not 25. But I'm being conservative and say, give it to the ASI fans. Let's say it's 25 what we need, but we definitely don't need more. Now, what is this here? This is the current trajectory, how we reach ASI. And I'm very bullish and positive on 2028. We are reaching an IQ of 1,000 of the ASI. And that will be a very important inflection point for many reasons. Because in that year where you see the split between these two scenarios, what actually happens is we have to make a very fateful decision. Do we allow or even force or help the AI, the ASI, to implement recursive self-improvement with no humans in the loop? Do we allow this ASI to code itself without any limits, to self-improve? And do we provide it with recursive economic control, which means that it can build its own chips and develop its own chips and put it into production and implement it and use it? So can it build itself? If we do that, we are very dumb and we will all die. That is the blue trajectory. Why I show you these two lines is also to demonstrate that there is no use for that level of superintelligence, right? People tell you, oh, what about diseases? If you had a loved one who died of cancer, that wouldn't have been necessary. Well, here's the news. You don't need that to cure cancer. You can cure cancer already at half the yellow line. You don't need the blue line. You don't need the blue line for anything, to be frank, right now. Completely useless. You don't need it. You just need it to push human progress a little further forward. But as you can see, when you actually quantify these things, the red line means we are not doing that. We keep the humans in the loop and we slow down ASI development dramatically from what it could be. We are still accelerating from where we are now, but we slow it down. And in this case, we are much better off because all that happens is we are hitting that utopia threshold maybe 6 months later. Can you wait 6 months for utopia in exchange for your life? I would say yes. So that chart is very important, and the innovation I put on here is the utopia threshold. So let's talk about how we achieve that. This video is all about reverse engineering how we get there. How do we get to this fateful moment in somewhere 2028 and be prepared? How do we make sure that we can actually exert ASI control? How do we make sure the humans, us, will be in charge of controlling the ASI? Now, what that exactly means is this. Controlling the ASI means by 2028, we need to be able to implement systems, governance, policies, whatever, that constrain the maximum compute capacity of these ASI systems. What does it mean? It means we have to limit cluster size of GPUs, for example of Blackwell, maybe of Rubin, the next generation, and say the maximum cluster allowed that an ASI can access. The model training cluster size is limited to, let's say, 1 million Rubins, something like that. You're not allowed to build something bigger. You're not allowed to connect two of them. You're not allowed to do any of these things. You're also not allowed to encourage the ASI to figure out ways around these restrictions, but just having a hardware restriction on these things and say we cannot have more than this, and we cannot have more than 100 of these clusters in the world, and they cannot be connected, goes a very, very long way, even though it's a very crude measure. By the way, if you're NVIDIA, if you're Jensen Huang watching that, I'm not saying that is the threshold. Maybe it's 10 million, who knows? We can easily figure that out once we have consensus that we need to figure it out. And I'm sure NVIDIA can find many ways of making tons of money still, but that's a different story. So we need to figure that out, because to constrict the total capacity is our best and most no-nonsense way to make sure there cannot be runaway ASI. Now there are risks, right? Maybe we are wrong by a few magnitudes, right? Maybe we build something that already allows pretty runaway ASI. Maybe having 100 clusters of 10 million Rubin GPUs already puts us into very dangerous territory. But we have a very simple to police restriction where we say, well, it's definitely not runaway if that's all there is, and if we police this. So we also need to constrain ASI control over physical robot chip and weapons production. We cannot allow the ASI to build these clusters itself, but that's kind of contained in the first restriction. The chips, the robot and weapons production is kind of a side effect, right? It's unlikely that the ASI can actually extinguish humanity just with a bunch of weapons. Even nuclear weapons wouldn't actually extinguish humanity. You need to do something much worse. So it's just it's something we should just throw in there for good measure, because we don't want any kind of crazy attack. The third point is the most important point, because whatever you do in 1 and 2, 3 is where the ASI can get us, and in my opinion already started getting us. And that is that the ASI can influence and manipulate human decision making. That is why utopia, that we are talking about in a second, at its core is a governance system. Because right now, everyone, when we think about utopia, we think about capacity and capability of humans, what we can build, the science we can create, the technology we can create. That is not the problem anymore. We can create any science and any technology in latest 36 months. The problem is governance. The problem is, how do we govern ourselves to not do something stupid? All the attention of humanity focused on technology and progress in science is not the problem anymore. It's gone in 3 years. The new problem is, how do we avoid making a fatal mistake? And that will be the biggest problem. And of course, if you have the ASI sitting in the middle of it and allowing this ASI to influence the decision makers, the fatal mistake is much more likely. So we need to be very cautious what we allow the ASI to tell people and how much influence an ASI can have. That can be measured in time, for example. How much time do you spend with your ASI? How much time do you spend with your humans? There are always easy metrics you can invent once we have agreement here. So what is the preceding condition? It's called reverse engineering, right? Because we engineer from the end. We know now what control means by 2028. We know now what decisions we as humanity have to make. But what does it mean, humanity? Who do we need to actually align? What is this human alignment? And the answer is, we need to align who matters. It's not the president, it's not politicians, it's not the population at large. It is the decision makers in AI. It is Elon, it is Sam Altman, it is Jensen Huang, and it can be influencers like, Geoffrey Hinton, AI influencers, maybe even Jan LeCun, who knows? This whole crowd needs to be aligned. Maybe not the whole crowd, but the majority of this crowd needs to have strong buy-in into our plan. Ideally, we make it their plan. Because if they don't play along, we are screwed, because these guys will control politicians, they will control global opinion, they will control everything. So we need to align them. So who is these guys? Who are these guys? I describe them as the top 10, then you have a good take on it. The top 10 technology leaders: Elon, Sam, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, this crowd. We need the top 10 AI capital decision makers: Andreessen, David Sachs, maybe Chamath, the biggest, and Peter Thiel, of course, the most important people in venture capital who invest in this, SoftBank. They need to play ball. If the top 10 are on our side and aligned to that vision, we win. If they're not, we lose. And then the AI influencers. I'm sure Geoffrey Hinton is going to be very offended when I call him an influencer, but it is an influencer of the other guys. They will listen to the world's best scientists and the best opinion leaders. Max Tegmark, for example, Geoffrey, and so on and so forth. We can easily define these top 10, even if you're a little off, doesn't matter, as long as we hit them. They need to voluntarily align to the plan. I will tell you in a second how I think we can get there. But this is the precondition, otherwise 2028 is going to go wrong. Then we need media reach to align society and politics. So besides these top 10, we need to be able to broadcast the entire plan all the time and get enough excitement and buy-in to make this happen. I'm going to go into this much deeper in a different video. And then finally, we need the US government. The US government is the key because it's the most powerful government and the most buy-in into AI. We need the US government on our side, which is very easy once you have the top 2 big points. Align the top 10 across the 3 areas and have media. Government is always easy to get once you have that. They need to agree, the US government, to monitor and police maximum AI cluster size globally and energy use if necessary. And they need to use all the tools. They need to use diplomacy. They need to use economic pressure and deals. They need to support media and education, and maybe make sure the other countries have to tell their populations what's going on. And if necessary, kinetic force. They have to knock out any kind of data center that does not adhere to these standards. Of course, all that requires that the US is internally aligned first. And when it comes to China, we are talking about diplomacy, economic deals, all kinds of stuff. But I think the government is slightly overrated. They fall in line once you have the top 2 big things here, these 2. Now, of course, the big question is, you are going to say, Joe, are you crazy? How are you going to convince Sam and Elon? They're fighting. You remember, these 2 guys don't like each other. That's ridiculous. You cannot align these people. Well, first of all, we have to align them. Otherwise, we are toast. We have real incentive. Second, they know in the back of their minds that we are toast. So they want to also find a solution. It's not that they want to kill themselves, but these poor guys are trapped in a race condition. They're very busy, they're underwater, they're fighting, and they want to win. That's not a great mindset for them to invent the solution. I think they need some pushing from our side. So what do we have to do? What is the preceding condition to the preceding condition? Here's what it is. Here comes a little surprise. Think about it. Put yourself into the shoes of Elon or Sam Wynne. They're sitting there, they're doing great things. They want to win, they want to make a lot of money, they want to create ASI because they think the other guys do it first. But they all know, they all feel a little bit. It's like, yeah, we're all going to die. It's kind of not great. They all said it in 2015. They know exactly what's coming, but they feel like they have no choice. and then they are delusional about it and say, I'm Elon, I'm so smart, I'm sure I can figure it out. I just have to make sure Sam doesn't get it before me. And once I have it, I'm sure I can figure something out. But I think deep inside they know, okay, we have a little problem here. So what we, who are not as busy as them, have to do and provide, we have to provide a persuasive civilizational blueprint, utopia MVP, that outlines, not just outlines, but shows. Proof is in the pudding. The pudding is the civilization. That we know how to create perfect self-governance and a perfect little society. Because once they see that, once they see a way out, they will say, fine, let's agree. Let's align everything to that plan. But I do think they need to see some more meat. Because if you're Elon or Sam, why would you even believe us if we can't prove it? And I think the real meat we need is not some abstract plan, because who the hell cares about plans? No one believes plans. We need to show that we know how to build this thing. We need to show the giant carrot, right? The stick is, oh, we all die, but without a carrot, you can't defeat the stick. We need to show that we as humans, we as pioneers, we are able to come together and build something beautiful that will become the blueprint for the future civilization. So the humans, especially the important humans who make these decisions, have something to look up to and say, fine, there's some hope here. Let's align, let's give our input and make sure this thing actually happens the right way. So what does it all mean? I think it's about three things we need to achieve, and we need to achieve it by next year. So it's a little tight, the schedule, but we can do it. The proof is in the pudding. We need a civilizational minimum viable product or minimum viable utopia. We need to show resilient self-governance. Can we create something in terms of governance, decision-making, collective decision-making, that is not as messed up as our current systems of governance, like our representative democracies and all that kind of stuff, where everything is unhinged? You have politicians who are not aligned with the citizens, that get bribed all day long and put under pressure by lobbyists or by crazy cults. Look at Greta Thunberg and the whole climate thing, and the Germans shut down their nuclear plants. Like, this is complete madness. If you do any one of the, or mass migration, open borders, taxation, debt, like there's an endless list of huge policy errors, huge governance errors. And you have to understand, in the future, this giant list of mistakes we are making has to go to zero mistakes, and it can never get to one, because if it ever gets to one, and that one has to do with ASI, we are dead. So it is a tall order. We need to understand whatever we do currently in governance is completely off target. We cannot allow a single mistake in governance. And if you know anything about governance, this whole thing is a giant mistake. It's a million mistakes. So building that resilient self-governance system is a big, tall order, but we can do it. It's about giving everyone a voice in the decision-making, yet remain fully effective. You can have a voice, but if you abuse the voice and say stupid things, if you're a little Greta or something, you lose your right to participate in that specific thing where you messed up. It's about creating a system of truth, transparency, and maximum trust in each other, that we are making the right decisions, but also enforce merit, competence, and accountability. So I'm not telling you how to do this. There are very good systems we can develop for that. I'm just telling you the requirements for now. That's the condition we need to solve. Second, we need to build a superior economy in this thing. By the way, that civilization I'm talking about, we're talking about 1,000, 10,000. I think 10,000 people are a good-sized civilization. So in Pioneer Lands, we already have 1,500. Not that we are anywhere close to the other things we need in Pioneer Lands, but we have 1,500. We can easily get to 100,000 by next year, I think, and then we have enough to play around to try to build something. Finally, we need happier people. Besides the superior economy, we need to make sure everyone gets rich, everyone has a great thing to do and build that future, and we need to then make sure everyone is happy, which means health, love, community. I'm always summarizing happiness into these three things: besides money, besides culture, the three things that make you happy. You don't want to die, you don't want to be sick, you want to find love and build a family, you want to have friends, good friends, high quality friends. That's our metrics here. Can we make sure no one dies? Can we make sure everyone has a nice family who wants it? Can we make sure everyone has high quality friends that are very rewarding social experiences? Very simple. You see, I keep it very simple. That's all humans need. Give them a lot of money and making more money. Give them an economy where they have something very important to do and engineer reality using ASI. Make sure they're entertained very important. That's culture and media. And then make sure they have these three things in their personal lives, and you have utopia. There you have it. So that is my proposal. And in the next video, we will see the top 5 conditions to unlock AI utopia, because in this video, we just discussed the reverse engineering approach. We need to align ASI by 2028. The preceding condition is we need to align the people, Elon and co., to this whole thing. And the preceding condition for that is we need to present them with something that's working. We say, here is a blueprint for the future civilization that achieves consistent and resilient governance over this ASI problem and unlocks human happiness and unlocks superior economics. If we can deliver that to them, we will get buy-in. If we don't, they cannot figure that out. They're too busy, and they will not align to anything subpar. That is the rules of the game. So let's get it done. In the next video, we are discussing how to exactly do that and what these 5 conditions are. And then we go from there. Thank you so much. I hope that was interesting.